Sean McCann.
Greetings. Welcome to Wake the Dead. Today, I am super delighted. We are so happy to have good friend Mark Devlin to the show. Mark, you were my first guest on Wake the Dead years and years ago. And actually, your show, Good Vibrations, was where one of the first places I started to reveal my research information. You invited me as a guest, and we've been friends for like 7 years now. It's been fantastic, and we haven't spoken in so long, and you've done so much good things, and I'm just delighted to have you here now to tell us about how you're living and how your work has progressed and what you're thinking about these days. Welcome, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, bro. It's been a minute. I was trying to work out how many years. It's probably about 7 years, actually. I remember you jumping on my podcast to talk about your analysis of symbolism in Stanley Kubrick movies. So we had a couple of discussions about that. And I remember you starting Wake the Dead back in the day. And we've come a long way since. We spoke both before and after the COVID nonsense. But we probably got a lot of catching up to do because it's been, 2 or 3 years since we had a discussion. So,
that's right.
Yeah, let's see where it takes us.
Well, we're very delighted. For anyone who is not familiar with you, you have written 3 books: Musical Truth 1, 2, and 3, deep diving into all of the Satanism that is music, the mind control that is popular music, and you've written 3 fiction books, which you were a guest on the show. On my show, we were discussing the first one, The Cause and the Cure. And since then, you have written 2 more, and I'm very excited. The first one was just great. I was a big fan of it. I loved how you weaved in the different allegorical, occult symbolism, and really gave us I saw myself in that book. Like when they were researching and learning new stuff, I recognized that. It's like, yeah, that's my life too, you know? Right. It was really fun. And so tell us about the other 2 books. Let's start there.
Yeah, well, thank you. So I've written 8 books so far. The first one was about 20 years ago, and that was called Tales from the Flip Side. And that was in the days when I was still working as a full-time DJ. And it was basically a collection of anecdotes and funny stories about what it's like to be a level 2 DJ, not one of the famous, successful, rich guys, but someone out there just trying to make a living out of it all and all the things that you encounter on the way. But that book was written from the perspective of me as a normie, basically, because I'd not woken up yet at that point. I was still very much ensconced in a regular, completely conditioned worldview, conditioned by social engineers. Didn't even realize at the time that there were social engineers and that whole thing was a very real science. But I was definitely caught up in a lot of the agendas that they'd foisted on particular demographics. And then 9 years later, I put out my first Musical Truth book. And by that point, I'd started to pay attention to what was really going on in the world. And I'd come to realize that the world is not run by the people we're told it is. You don't say. Call me a slow learner. And I really wanted to know how that played out in the world of music, the music industry, of which I'd been a part. And so I threw myself into research of that nature for 5 years. And that first book, which came out in early 2016, just past the 10th anniversary, was based on that 5 years worth of research. And I got to the end of it, and I was talking about occult symbolism in pop videos and satanic ritual practices which go on both within and without the industry, and family bloodlines and how this dictates who gets to become successful and prominent in all these fields, mass mind control, social engineering, all this other stuff. And I realized that there's so much information there that it couldn't possibly be contained within one book. So there had to be a volume 2, which there was in early 2018. And then we all got ensconced in the COVID nonsense. We're all forced to suffer through that. And so I put my time in enforced house arrest to good use in putting together volume 3, because I thought, well, there's still more to say about all this, and particularly the reaction to many of these rock stars and celebrities and famous people to what was going on. 99.5% of them were all on board with the official narrative. And from that, we can draw the conclusion that they're all owned and controlled assets. So volume 3 was pretty much about that. And then I had intended to cap it a trilogy, but the information just kept on coming in. And because I'd written those 3 books by that time, and people had become familiar with me as that guy that talks about all this stuff, I kept on getting emails saying, Mark, look at this album sleeve. Mark, look at this stuff I've dug up on this group and who this guy's dad was. And the information kept piling up. And I thought, well, if I just let all this sit in my email inbox for the rest of my days, it's not going to do any good at all. So it would be a travesty if this information doesn't get out there. And so that became what is effectively volume 4, which I titled No One's Dad's a Plumber. I gave it a catchy sort of conversation starting title to make people sit up and pay attention. But that is effectively volume 4 in the series. So I think that came out after we last spoke. And then when it comes to my fiction trilogy, in 2019, I really wanted to try my hand at writing fiction because I'd done 2 non-fiction books by that point. And I thought, I wonder what it's like to actually get inside this other genre of writing. And I'd figured that truth fiction, so-called, is a brilliant way of getting across certain points without having to provide citations and references, which you have to in non-fiction if you want to be taken seriously. So with apparent fiction, you've got free rein to say whatever you want, and to have your characters do and say whatever you want because you're the god of your own universe. There's a bit of a metaphor there, I think, for this reality in which we find ourselves, where you've got an architect of this realm. I'm sure we get onto all of this. And this architect has this world as its playground, and it can basically manipulate and puppeteer characters to have particular desired outcomes manifest. And that's what you do as an author when you get into the fiction writing process. So I set myself the challenge of trying to write a layered book where on the surface, the exoteric narrative would be effectively a crime thriller. And this was the first one. It was The Cause and the Cure. And it was set in Oxford, which is Illuminati Central in England. You know, that's where all the elite types go to get their system indoctrination and all the satanic rituals and stuff like that. And I just happened to have been born there. I mean, that's an irony to me. I'm here exposing all this stuff, and I was born right in the belly of the beast. I never went to university. I wasn't a part of the academic side of the city. I just happened to live in the area. So I set the story in Oxford because they say write about what you know. And I know Oxford very well. And I set it in the early 90s. So it was 1990 going into the early part of 91. And so on the surface, it's kind of an Inspector Morse style crime thriller. But if you strip away that surface narrative, there's many other layers lying beneath it. So I've tried to get a bit of metaphor, a bit of spiritual allegory in there, and definitely some teachings. And very much as my inspiration for that, I turned towards Stanley Kubrick, who we mentioned earlier, because I'd always marveled at how Stanley seemed to have been able to encode so many different aspects to his stories. I think The Shining is probably the obvious one, but I think you find it with all his movies. And if you strip away that surface narrative, which is there for the mainstream cinema-going masses, if you have a bit of a knowledge of occult matters and symbolism and stuff, you find absolute treasure troves of Easter eggs that have been loaded into those films. So I tried to do that with the narrative of that first story. And then after I put that out in 2019, of course, COVID came along the next year. Then I wrote Musical Truth Volume 3. And then I thought, well, I'd really like to do a second book. I always had it in mind to do a follow-up. So that became The Gift and the Curse, which is the second one. And that was set in the latter part of 2001 against the backdrop of 9/11. Again in Oxford with the same characters 11 years on. And then eventually I thought, well, I need to complete this trilogy. because it doesn't feel right there just being two books. I need to put a lid on this whole saga and bring the story full circle. And that's what I did with the latest one, The Tragedy and the Triumph. And I self published that early this year. And this one is set in 2020, bit of a slow news year. Nothing really happened in the world at that time, you know. So again, it's the same characters from the first book, 30 years on. And through the trilogy, you've witnessed them aging. They're in their early 20s, most of them in the first book. And by the last one, they're in their sort of mid to late 50s. And they've gone through some shit, as we all do. They've gone through a lot of trauma. They've gone through a lot of personal struggles and challenges in life. One of the aspects I've enjoyed the most of the whole fiction writing process is developing those characters and really investing a lot in them and putting a lot of my own personal baggage and personal traumas onto the characters. I think that's what a lot of fiction writers do. It's probably what a lot of filmmakers do as well, and artists of all kinds. They just project onto their creations, their characters, aspects of themselves. I remember reading the books of Ian Fleming growing up. I was a big fan of James Bond, not just the films. I was actually more into Fleming's books than the films because the books were full of sex and violence, which really appealed to me as a teenager. And they're just very gritty, raw stories. And I remember at the time hearing that Ian Fleming created James Bond as a kind of surrogate character for himself. So when you read about Bond and his flaws and his vices and his preferences, he likes the ladies, he likes drink, he smokes too much. That's Ian Fleming. He's telling you about himself. So that always stuck with me. And I thought, well, I can do this with some of my characters. But with me, it's more of a composite thing. So I don't have one central character at the heart of all these stories. There's a small group of them. And I've kind of dished out aspects of myself equally onto all these characters. And the main character throughout these stories has actually been a black woman named Verity Hunter. So all the character names are coded and they tell you something about the character. Some of them are anagrams. Some of them are translations of other words. And some of them just are wordplay. And when you decipher it, it tells you something about what this character is all about. So Verity Hunter basically means truth seeker, from veritas, the Latin, meaning truth. And it would have been very easy for me to have had a white male at the center of these stories. There is one, Keith, who's her partner. But I thought the central character should be a black female because that's going to be more challenging for me as a writer to imagine the world from the perspective of a black female rather than taking the easy option and doing it from a white male. So that's some of the stuff that went into those three stories. And it was a very satisfying process writing those three books, very cathartic, just very healing for me. And I'm really glad that I did it.
That's beautiful. Was it was that healing feeling the opposite of what you felt when you were making Musical Truth? Did Musical Truth just anger you more and more the more you wrote and like? Is it like a black and white one? Aspects of your consciousness, because with Musical Truth you can get into the left brain, you can really dig into the numbers and the dates and that type of thing, while on the other side you have to imagine with your right brain. And I'm sure there was much more catharsis on the fiction books.
Yeah, it was pretty much like that when I was writing the Musical Truth books, and I still talk about that stuff now. I do live talks and presentations at conferences and stuff getting into the Musical Truth research. So it's not like I've left it behind. I still jump into all of that. But the fiction writing process was almost therapy for that, because I write about some pretty dark subjects. I've just kind of stumbled into that. That's become my niche. It was never necessarily part of the plan for my life. I've just kind of found myself there. But the fiction writing serves as a form of therapy where I can get away from all of that. And like I said, you can have anything happen to your characters that you want. You don't have to justify anything. If anyone tries to pull you up on something you've said in one of your novels, you can just say, chill out, man, relax. It's fiction. Come on. Don't get so stressed.
Right. Yeah. And the way that, the the way that the characters have to deal with these effed up situations instead of like you yourself have to deal with the thought of all the mind control they've been putting on us. And like when you're discovering the truth of the music, you come to the realization of what the truth is. And it's, pretty, like, I don't know how to explain it, but I mean, it's black pill, I guess. I don't know. Like, and then, but it's you yourself dealing with it in your own mind and heart, and then you have to grapple with this stuff. And then with the books, the fiction books, you're able to release and talk about how they deal with and what their thought processes are while uh 9/11 is happening, or while the COVID scam was happening. And there's more to it. I mean, you weaved into missing children, like, elite uh, uh politicians, and through these characters you're able to process the information and to think about it and express how you feel. So that too must be a lot more cathartic, instead of, because with the musical truth, you just get all the, and then you feel all the feelings, and then it's just like,
Right.
and then it must be depressing to, like
Well, it can
stay
be,
in
yeah.
that.
I mean, the irony is that a lot of the time, to de-stress from all the musical truth type information, all this dense, heavy information I put out there, I turn to music. I'm exposing the music industry, and then I find solace in music, certain types of music, obviously not all music. I listen to a lot of soulful, feel-good house music, which is steeped in gospel influences, a lot of it. And I just find it really lifts the spirit. I do a 2 hour show every week called The Sound of Now, which consists of all that kind of stuff. But in terms of the truth fiction, there is a lot of truth in there, and you find it in the characters. So, as I say, I've projected aspects of myself onto many of the characters. And in the first story, The Cause and the Cure, which is set in 1990, you find the two central female characters going through their dark night of the soul. So they're going through their awakening process. So it's Verity Hunter, and I've kind of juxtaposed her experience with that of May Pierce. There's another coded name. And she is a cop in the first story. She's a police constable. She's joined Thames Valley Police because she naively and deludedly thought that she could change the world, make it a better place. And she could achieve that through the police force. She didn't realize when she joined that it's controlled by Freemasons and Satanists and worse, but she comes to find out. And she realizes that the institution that she's signed up for is affiliated with this all-encompassing secret society network, which I've called the Order. So it's a bit like in Ian Fleming's James Bond books, you had Smersh and then Spectre, which were the major criminal organizations that Bond had to do battle with. And in my stories, it's the Order. And every time these characters think they've put the Order to bed and they've defeated them and they're, on the retreat, they regroup and they come back stronger than ever with another bloody psyop to unleash on everyone. So May Pierce discovers that the police are tangled all up in that web with the Order, and that it feeds out into all aspects of organized society within Oxford. So within that context, Oxford, the city within the ring road, serves as a microcosm for the world in general. So everything that happens in these stories within Oxford is a metaphor for the world and the secret society networks that control everything, everywhere. So she's going through that. And then you've got Keith, who's Verity's partner, and he's a bit further along in his journey. So he's reading things like Bill Cooper, Behold a Pale Horse, and he's listening to Jordan Maxwell and Michael Tessarion and people like this, and Jim Mars and, The Creature from Jekyll
May
Island, reading all
Brussel.
that stuff. Oh, G. Edward
May
Griffin.
Brussel too.
May
He
Brussel,
was
yeah.
getting,
He's a fan of
yeah,
May
yeah.
Brussel, that's right. And May Brussel was proper old school because before the internet, she was like this pioneering conspiracy theorist, and she was galvanized into action by the JFK assassination and all the anomalies that she saw there. But she didn't have the internet to be able to disseminate her information. So she used to record cassette tapes, sit there and speak into a cassette tape and then make recordings of the cassettes and put them into the mail, into actual physical envelopes with actual physical stamps on, and queue up at the post office to put them in the mail, because that's what you had to do back then. So he's a fan of that. And Keith is into this consciousness guru in the first story, who I've named Max Zeal, which may or may not be another coded name. And he's this guy who delivers lectures, and he gets very animated and very passionate in his lectures. He kind of smashes his hand down on lecterns and causes glasses of water to go smashing on the floor, because he just gets so into what he's trying to communicate. And with each of these stories, it's quite interesting for me now looking back on them, because writing them has taken 7.5 years. And when I think of that first book in 2019, I myself was in a different place to where I am now in terms of the way I see the world and this realm of existence. And that obviously colored the writing of that book. So there's a lot of natural law teachings in that book. And Max Zeal in particular is talking about consequentialism, how the way that you conduct your behaviors in your life has an impact on the experiences that you undergo and what comes back to you in the form of what people might refer to as karma. I've got a slightly different standpoint on that now, and I think by the time readers get to that third novel, The Tragedy and the Triumph, they'll detect a little bit more cynicism creeping in the writing, and that's just bleeding through from me as the author. I mean, the middle book, The Gift and the Curse, I was kind of in that transition process, so it's not as easy to determine where my mind was at or where my soul was at that point. But that's also interesting, I think, because as you go back and read the books, it reminds you as the author of where you were at a particular time. And that inevitably colors the way the characters behave and what they're into. So by the third story, the character of Keith, I think, carries more of my personal characteristics than any of the others. And, you know, if you read about the character of Keith and the way he views the world in that third story, you'll get an insight into my mind in 2026.
That's excellent. And it's, I mean, we are now in our 50s, 40s and 50s, you know, obviously we're going to see the world differently than we did in the 20s, in our 20s. But our progression through truth, we all have these stages, you know, and I remember when I first started, I was on Facebook and I was sharing Alex Jones, and I was like listening to all the occult stuff I could, and people were calling me crazy, you know, and they, you know, they would attack me for being this and that, and it was always this battle, and now and then, you know, I found my podcast, and now I have like a way to express, and it's more like it's become, and I have changed. And now it's almost like I'm at a point where I feel like I've said everything on the podcast, you know, and like everything that's important anyway. And now I just keep going back to the same topics and going further deeper, you know, but like I'll find myself on the social media now, and instead of arguing with everybody, I'll just be like, oh, I talked about this 5 years ago. Here's my video share, you know, and like, and it, so it's, and even now, like my own brain is changing, you know, I don't feel the Max Zeal to like smash tables and lecterns anymore. And it's almost like you get to the point where you see the people continuing to choose the wrong and to be ignorant, and you get kind of like, they deserve it. Like it's, you know, the world
becomes a state of acceptance, doesn't it? It's just like it is what it is. I've tried the best I can, and okay, so if this is the outcome, then that's how it is.
It's like, I mean, I can't say it any louder. I mean, maybe I could if I could get more people listening, but you know,
get tired, you know, it's wearing.
That's true. Yeah.
And I'm actually wrapping up my Good Vibrations podcast series this year.
Right.
I've taken the decision because of what you've just said there. I really feel like I've said everything I can on it. I've had 278 conversations about a wide array of topics, but I just feel that it's reached a natural conclusion now. It's 15 years. Seems a good
Right.
point to wind it up. I don't want to stretch it out to 20 just for the sake of it, because I feel that it's just something that's run its course. And so I've taken
Right.
the decision to have a few more conversations. And by the end of this year, I'll be winding that series up. Those conversations will still be there for anyone that wants to go back and take a listen, but
Right.
it just becomes repetition after a while. You come to realize
I
you have a new discussion and you find yourself going over the same old points that you did 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 8 years ago. And,
right.
it runs out of
And
steam.
it's like the people are just learning now. It's like the people are just getting the point of like, oh, they're just realizing that transgender cults are an ancient thing that have been
Right.
for since forever. And like,
There's
yeah,
people
I talked
finding out
about
about
that
the
10 years
Bilderberg
ago,
group for the
guys. I was
first
trying to
time.
tell you. Right. Yeah, dude. I
And,
mean,
and
it's
you
like,
know, you
it's
have to
almost
remain
painful to
conscious
watch
that there
them.
are new people coming on board and waking up all the time, and they
Right.
need access to this
And you got to
information.
have
But the
compassion.
but the point is
You got
that's
to,
what archives
right.
are for. So those conversations are always going to be
That's
there in
right.
the archives if you want to go back and listen to them. And that's the great thing about
And
books
you're,
as well. That's why I do books, to preserve the
right.
information as a depository for it. And then
Right.
anyone that ever wants to look at these subjects has got it right there in that book, and they can
Right.
open the pages at any time. That's why we do these things, right? So you don't have
That's
to
right.
keep having 500 different conversations with 500 different people. Read the friggin' book.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I've got workings too. I'm working on that in that direction myself. Um, and I admire you for all the work you've done. Like, holy crap, you've done so much. And I feel like I'm being lazy just talking into a microphone, but compared to you.
That's
But
a big
anyway,
part of it, man. It's very
the
important
you
work.
well, it's true. And a lot of people learn through their ears. Like I'm one
That's
who
right.
does that, you know. But like all of your shows, Good Vibrations, they have all they're they're good forever. It's not like you're talking about this one thing that happened that week, and like you're talking about the generalities of the mind and of the control system. And these truths are apparent now as they were then, as they will be in the future. So as people listen to it 20 years from now, they're still going to be able to gain the same value, have the same value for it as the people listening to it when it first came out. And some
Right.
of the things that you talked about were really eye-opening. I used to listen to every show, before I ever started doing it. You were one of my go-to listens, and
Mm.
it is sad for me that's, but we're all growing and changing, and it's your thing, so you do what you want to do. And
Mm.
I do have a request. If you're gonna have a few more shows, would you mind doing one more with me where I could talk to you about my latest Kubrick discoveries? Because I've found all kinds of really neat stuff that you should learn about. It's really cool.
Okay, sure.
So
Yeah, that's a deal. I
awesome,
still plan to have a
awesome.
few conversations before I wrap it up. I'll probably wrap it up in December. So if we're quick, we can get another one in the schedule before then.
Yes,
But you
awesome.
definitely
Well,
become desensitized to all this stuff, like you said, when you've been doing it for a certain amount of time. I think back to some of the subjects I've discussed on Good Vibrations, and they were pretty horrific the first time I came across them. They were shocking. Discovering the truth about MK Ultra, trauma-based mind control, all the terrible things that get done to kids in these generational families, and satanic ritual abuse. The first time you come across that, you're like, whoa, how can this level of evil exist in this world? But you
right,
keep researching it, and you speak to other people that have looked at this information as well, and you see it encoded into movies and TV shows and stuff like that. And when you've been doing all that for a number of years, you kind of have to zone out from it all just to be able to
right,
continue operating. It's a bit like reporters for newspapers or TV stations that go out and report on murders, or police officers who go to scenes where horrific things have happened. There has to be a level of dissociation and just detachment from the
right,
graphic horror of these things if you're going to be effective in your job. Because a
right,
police officer's no good if they're going to be sobbing uncontrollably and taking 6 months off for trauma every time there's a murder. And so if
right,
you're a researcher, you're no good if you crack up every time you come across one of these subject areas. So you have to kind of put this firewall up so that
right.
it's not affecting your emotions too much
Right.
so that you can continue to report the information. And I realize going back now to some of these subjects I've discussed years after the event, I've become so familiar with the fact that it goes on that I don't find it as shocking as I once did. I joke often on social media, I'm unshockable now. There's nothing you could say that would surprise me anymore about this
Yeah.
Monty Python clown world reality, this absolute joke ass world in which we find ourselves. I mean, that's middle aged cynicism for you.
Yeah. I have kind of calloused over, and I've done lots of work into that specific topic of uh trauma based mind control, and I've spoken to survivors of it, and I've done deep dives into the papers of the FBI with GH Estabrooks, and I mean, but I still find myself crying uncontrollably sometimes. When I'm scrolling through Twitter and I see a little girl who is walking through fire, and she's just a burnt, immolated sacrifice, and like I see it as the immolation, the Holocaust that it is, and everybody's just like, oh, they're and they take a video of it and they put it on, and I'm like watching the snuff film as I scroll through Twitter, and it's just like it's still, but it doesn't shock me. Like I know it's happening, and I understand the evil that perpetuates it, and so now, I mean, it's not like uh everything makes sense now when you understand Satanism and psychopathy and power and hierarchies, and that blackmail and all those things. Obviously they're burning children and making us watch to fucking break our brains. Like
One of the worst things for guys like us is recognizing that there are certain ritual dates where these things
right,
take place. And it's often
right,
equinoxes, solstices, and the midpoints between them. So there's 8 key points of the year, but there's other
right,
holidays as well. So, it gets to
right.
the spring equinox, and that's a beautiful time of year. I started my first story on the 22nd of March, 1990, just tapping into that incoming
Oh, you
powerful
broke up a
energy.
little bit.
Yeah. So I was saying, can you hear me?
Okay,
Yeah.
there you are. Yes,
Okay.
now I can hear you. Yes, yes.
So, yeah, I set the start of the first story at the spring equinox of 1990, 22nd of March, to tap into some of that incoming powerful energy at that time of year. But I recognize also that Satanists see that as a key point in the calendar, and that dictates when they pull off many of their stunts and their little psyops and their rituals and their sacrifices and stuff. And the 1st of
Right,
May is a big one, Beltane, May Day. So a big part
right,
of that first story takes place 1st of May 1990, because that's a date that has a lot of ritual, ceremonial significance in Oxford. For centuries, there's been this tradition that at the break of dawn on the 1st of May, aspects of academia in Oxford, the various colleges within the university, take part in these rituals. And part of it involves the students jumping off the balusters of Magdalen Bridge into the waters of the River Cherwell below. And they do it in
hmm,
full ball regalia, all dressed up. And the thing about that particular stretch of the river is it's very shallow. And so every year it results in
hmm.
injuries. A lot of them break their legs and break their necks and things like that. So you would think in an era now which is obsessed with health and safety and wokeness, that ritual would have been banned. That various groups would have said,
Right,
no, we can't have this. We can't have these people getting injured every year. But it continues because it's ingrained
right,
within the occult tradition of Oxford, Illuminati Central.
right,
So I put that
right,
in the first book. And so when people read about these rituals that are taking place, that's real stuff. And it's 1st of May, go figure, midpoint between the spring equinox and the summer solstice. And so dates are important. Dates are important to the sick ones, the psychopaths, the Satanists. And so
right.
I've made dates important to me as well. So I've had a lot of the aspects of these stories take place on these important, significant dates. And it's even come down to the launch dates of the book, because I worked really hard to get Plumber ready for the spring equinox of 2025. I wanted to launch it on that date, not because I'm a Satanist, despite what some might tell you, But because Satanists and dark occultists do not have the monopoly on dates and numbers or symbols or colors.
Yeah,
These
that's
things are
right.
available for any of us to use. It's just that they've seen the potential of tapping into that powerful time of year, and they launch many of their psyops and their stunts then, which is why COVID kicked off when it did around the world, right around the time of the spring equinox 2020. No coincidence. And every year you see an event of this nature taking place at that time. So I thought, well, I'm going to launch
Yeah,
my project then on that date to try and dissipate and offset some of that negative dark energy. And I did the same thing with the tragedy and the triumph this year. I just missed the equinox actually by one day. So it came out on the 23rd of March. But that's okay because the 23rd of March 2020 is when the bumbling oaf Boris Johnson popped up on British TV screens announcing that England was going to get plunged into dystopian lockdown. Right on
right.
cue, right at that time of
Yeah,
year.
I remember that, and I remember Trump over here was saying, "Oh, we're going to lift it on the 1st of May." And then when 1st of May came, is they were like, "No, it's permanent." I remember when that, and I was paying attention to the date at the time because,
Well,
like, I
that's
was,
interesting because the Gulf War in Iraq and Afghanistan in 2003, that was launched in the wake of 9/11, with 9/11 as the excuse for going in there, kicked off on the 22nd of March 2003. Of course it did. But the 1st of May
right,
that year is when Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of State, announced that military action was going to cease. So that ritual took place from the 22nd of March to the 1st of May, 1/8 of the year, that
right,
important midpoint
right.
spring. And the 1st of
That
May,
40 days.
the 1st of
Right.
May in what year was it? 2011, I think, is when the world was told that a daring team of US Navy SEALs had gone into this compound in Pakistan where Osama bin Laden, the mastermind of the 9/11 attacks, was hiding out. He's gone from left handed to right handed, and his beard has got progressively darker through the years, but don't let that worry you.
Right, his
They
nose
went
got
in there
wider.
and he's using one of his wives as a human shield, being the terrible, dastardly villain that he is. But don't worry, folks, because the SEALs took him out and, shot him, killed him. And then, in accordance with his Muslim beliefs, because they're nice and respectful like that, they buried his body at sea. So
Right,
you can't see it, folks. Sorry about
right,
that, but just take our word for it. We
right.
got
But
to. And
there's proof because we saw Obama and Hillary all watching a TV screen. We saw their
right,
reactions,
we
their
saw Hillary
faces.
going, so it
Must
must
be
be true,
true.
right? Because Hillary is such a nice person. She's shocked by things like that. It really,
Right,
really gets her here. Oh,
right.
by
Because
the
she
way, if you want to
laughs
speak to
about
that team
raping.
of Navy SEALs involved in that operation, sorry, you can't. Because the helicopter that they were all traveling in sometime afterwards just happened to crash and burn, and they all died. So, terrible
Right.
thing, folks. But that was on the 1st of May. And we were told that Osama bin Laden died for the second time because he actually died at the end of 2001. But we're told that 10 years later, Obama masterminded this operation to take him out. So the date is no accident, the 1st of May. A lot of important things happen on the 1st of May. Tony Blair, New Labour, his political party got into, well, apparent power on the 1st of May 1997. And of course, that was paving the way for Blair to be in office here in the UK to
He's
preside
still
over these
being
important
used.
events.
He's still doing stuff, Blair.
I know,
Isn't
he
he
just won't
like,
go away.
oh my
It's like a
God.
fucking cancer, man.
Right.
You can't put it down. It just keeps regrowing, just keeps coming back. They're really getting their money's worth out of that particular asset,
Yeah,
having
that's for
invested so
sure.
much in him. Blair was in office in 1997. He got in for his first term as prime minister. And so he was there to preside over the ritual murder of Princess Diana on the 31st of August, 1997. Then he got in for a second term in 2001. So he's there in office, ready for the events of 9/11, which were known to be coming. And then he gets in for a third term in 2005, right in time for 7/7, the bombing
Right.
event in London, which was said to be Britain's 9/11. And then,
Mm.
he fucks off a couple of years after that, and Gordon Brown comes into office. And, in England, not that it's any measure of anything, but we're about to have 7 prime ministers in how many years is it? 10 years. It's
Right.
ridiculous. They just keep swapping them out. Liz Truss was British Prime Minister for 44 days. So you've got to wonder what she found out or what she did to piss him off or why she didn't fit the
Right.
bill. But, she said nothing about it.
It's funny they don't. I mean, it's weird they don't have such loyal. Like, I mean, our congressmen and stuff. They're like 90 years old, still going.
Well, your system makes
It's
more
really weird.
sense.
They
A
can't
leader
get
comes in and they stay there for 4 years. Then there's a new election. They have the opportunity to stay for another 4 years. And once they've done 8, that's it. They're done. They move on. Over
well
here,
for the
you
president.
could you could
Yes,
be prime minister for 44 days and say, you know what? I don't like this, and just walk out. It's just complete nonsense. So
who
we had
would like
Blair
it?
for
Oh, really?
how many years do we have Blair for? 10 years. 10 years. In the
That's
meantime, we've had
crazy.
7 different so-called leaders in that same time.
Yeah.
Because Keir
They couldn't
Starmer's
get
coming in
one
soon.
evil. They couldn't get one as evil as Blair. They want
Well,
they
well,
wanted
Keir,
one just
Keir
that
Starmer
evil.
tried, and Keir
Right.
Starmer has been consistently hailed as Britain's worst prime minister ever. And I would concur with that because of the way this nation has changed culturally under that individual. I would argue that he's
Yeah.
actually worse than Blair. And
Yeah.
that's saying something when Blair is a satanic psychopath and probably so much more of the First Order. To say that someone is worse than him and has left behind a bigger trail of destruction in 2 years than Blair did in 10, that's some going, Starmer. That is some going.
It could just be the time that we're in. Because, like, if you look at the painting of, in quotes, King Charles III, it's just blood.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? With a monarch butterfly on his shoulder that he requested be put there. But it is like it's as if it signifies the blooding of the world. Like, this is the time, and that was right when the COVID was going, and afterwards, after the COVID with the jabs, and everybody was falling off, and people are still dying, and we could go on and on about that. But I believe that this is a certain time, season of the stars or whatever, where they're pushing the gas pedal. So Keir Starmer might have happened to be at the helm at that time, where Blair was there. We had the Gulf War and the Iraq stuff, and it was just this long, drawn out, forever wars. And now we got a different strategy going. So I think that I believe that the painting is going to be put on the wall next to all the other kings, and those paintings signify the time of each ruler. And so when they get to King Charles, that's the time of the culling, and that's why there's the blood. And so I believe, in my opinion, that we are in a certain time of where they're putting the pedal to the metal, and they're trying to throw everything at the wall at once, see what, like, they're trying to maintain power, and this technocracy is their last ditch effort to, like, put us in the cage, I think.
Well, it certainly seems
What do you
that
think
way.
about that?
And
Right.
I look back at what we all went through in 2020 and 21. And clearly that did engage a large number of people on the path to truth discovery, because it was so bloody blatant that we were under attack from the people that we're supposed to look to for protection and nurturing and to represent our interests. They were doing the very opposite of all of that. And so that caused many people to come over on our side, if you like, and start researching stuff. And I know a lot of people did fast track conspiracy theory courses. There's people who in the course of like 6 months got all up to speed on secret societies and Freemasonry and the Bilderberg Group and the New World Order and the Illuminati and all this stuff, MK Ultra.
Because of all the work that
symbolism.
you've done with your show, all the years,
Right. So it's
15
like
years of
15
your
years
show,
worth of research
teaching
in
them.
6 months.
Right.
Serious
Right,
fast
right.
track. But at the same time, look how many people in the world bought those lies and are still continuing to do so. And it gets more and more blatant, as you say. You get an official portrait of the king and it's drenched in blood. Hello? How much more of a clue do you want as to the true nature of these institutions and these individuals? And they're ramping up the agenda. You know, society is just completely ridiculous. It's absurd. Nothing makes any sense. It's a war on humanity. It's a war on freedom. And if anyone can't see that by this stage of the game, they're never going to. So
Yeah, that's
even,
they're going to
even,
get
even
churned
after all the
under.
research and all the information that guys like us have put in and have put out into the world, most people are still in this mind controlled haze, just stumbling around in the dark, in this fog. And you reach a point where you think, well, what more can be done for these people?
Right,
You know,
right,
the information is out there. If one day they should ever want to engage themselves in truth discovery, the books are there, the films are there, the conferences are
right,
there, the podcasts are there, the articles are there, you know. But other than that,
right.
I've reached a point where it just feels like an exercise in futility. That's not saying I'm
Yeah.
not going to continue doing it because this is my role in life now and nobody else would employ me anyway. So I'm kind of
God
stuck
bless
with the
you.
job.
Yeah.
But it just feels futile ultimately to me. That's
Yeah.
my cynicism creeping in again. And that's kind of dictated the worldview and the spiritual standpoint that I've got now, which is different to the one that I started out with. I'm a work in progress. I'm changing all the time, you know, and I never claim that I've arrived at a point in life where I know everything and this is my stance and I'm not going to be budged because I find myself budging all the time when new information and new life experiences and new insights come along. So where I'm at with all that now is very different to where I was when I wrote that first novel. And a lot of that comes through in the latest one, particularly through the character of Keith, and to a certain extent through the character of Max Zeal. So yeah, this might be a good segue to start talking about some of this stuff now.
Yeah, let's please do. So I often find myself like I'll read Gnosticism and I'll look around at the world and I understand how flawed that we've made this place, and if we are emanations of the same creation, I don't know, like why do we have to drink blood and eat flesh for us to understand the truth of Jesus? There's a lot of weird stuff going on, and it seems like the black magicians have figured it out and they're using it to their advantage. And I'm thinking, is this place really as good as I used to think it is? Are we in hell?
Right.
Is it might be a nice hell where we have flowers and we have cannabis and beautiful women and love and all this, but it is right. Maybe what the Christians and Catholics think of the fire and the brimstone and getting the torture and all that stuff, maybe that's just a a figurative way of uh, describing this world. Because what do the Buddhists say? Like suffering is one of the only real things that we can expect in a human life. This world is suffering. We have, and the fact that we have free will allows for all the evil of the psychopaths. And if maybe reincarnation is the soul being trapped here in this place because it hasn't learned the lessons, and Jesus came here to show us this is how you get out. And then Buddha came here to show us, hey guys, you're in hell. Come on, let's get out of here. To show us the way of morality and kindness and care and compassion that would heal this place, and would change it into a heaven. But it seems as though with us in charge of the world, we're kind of turning it into a hell. What is that? Did I give a good synopsis? Because that's kind of where I'm at.
Well,
It's tough. It's tough.
yeah, I don't put the blame for all the ills of the world at the door of humanity, of people.
Of
I
course,
don't,
right.
because I think we're the victims here. If you want to point the finger of blame somewhere, try pointing it in the direction of the architect of this realm, of whatever force or entity created this place. Because when you look at the so called natural world, the food chain, we have a situation where living creatures have to devour the flesh of other living creatures just to live another day, just to be able to survive. So you've got this absolute horror show, this carnage, this bloodbath of living sentient beings preying on other living sentient beings and killing them in horrific ways, consuming their flesh just so that they themselves can live another day. Meanwhile, they are highly likely to become the prey of another species that's going to come along and do the same thing to them. So, what kind of blueprint is that for an existence? And clearly, whatever entity or force created this place wanted it that way. It wanted all that suffering, all that death, all that horror, all that carnage. Otherwise, it could have been made differently. It's
Right.
not that difficult to see how this place could have been constructed so much better. And so, if you apply the scientific method to the question of what this place is and who or what created it to what end, this is something we're trained to do as truth seekers, right? You know, you get into this whole truthing lark, and people say you should use the scientific method, or it's the trivium. So, you know, grammar, logic, rhetoric. This is a method of truth discernment going back to the ancient world, the Greeks and such. And it entrains you to gather all the information that's available to you from a wide, eclectic variety of sources. Look for the overlaps and the consistencies and the things that back each other up and the correlations. Weed out the inconsistencies and the stuff that doesn't tally. See what you're left with, and then communicate your findings to the world. So, if we apply that process to these big questions, are we really going to conclude that the God, if we want to call it that, of this realm, the force that created this place in the form that it's in, this physical reality, apparently, does it have humanity's best interests at heart, or does it have the interest of living sentient beings at heart? Is it all about care and love and compassion? Does it care for us? Does it seek to nurture those qualities within us? And does it reward those qualities when we display them ourselves? Do we live in a world where if you try and live your life according to a moral code of doing no harm to other living sentient beings, do you reap in an observable, testable, repeatable way positive karma or consequences in return for doing that? No, you don't. I think we all know.
Sometimes,
I think
sometimes.
we all know good people who have tried in earnest, in all sincerity, to help others and minimize the disruption and the harm that they cause within their lives, reap a whole load of suffering and crap in return for their efforts. Think about the amount of broadcasters, authors, public speakers that have tried to communicate the horrors of what goes on in this world. Think about survivors of MK Ultra. Think about insiders from the medical industry, from science, academia, big business, government, geopolitics that have come out as whistleblowers and spilled the beans on what they found out. What happens to most of them? Well, many of them are taken out. Look at all the musicians going into my core musical truth research that have tried to speak out about the true nature of the industry. What happens to them? They just happen to have a heart attack, it seems, or have some sort of overdose, usually in a bathtub, often when they're 27 years of age.
Right.
But it
Bathtub.
doesn't end well
Right.
for any of these people. Meanwhile, if you flip that dynamic on its head and you think about all the sick, diseased, satanic psychopaths that we've got running around, trampling all over people's freedoms and rights, introducing measures into this world that are going to be deeply harmful to all other humans and all other living sentient beings and the very earth itself, what happens to most of them? They pass away peacefully in their beds at about 100 years of age, having undergone minimal personal hardship and suffering, having had a life of great personal wealth and comfort and luxury, if you're into those things. So the
Yeah.
idea that if you're a good person that tries to do good deeds, you'll reap good karma. Meanwhile, if you're evil, you'll reap terrible things in your life. It doesn't actually work that way. And we can see this for ourselves and we can test this for ourselves because this is
Yeah.
what set me off on the path of doing all these God videos. And this is going to be the tone of my next book, the subject area that I'm going to tackle, all these big questions. I started in early 2024, having personally observed the situation of a lot of my friends, people that I know personally. And I just noted a consistency there. All of these people were basically decent, basically good, trying to minimize harm, trying to live according to right action, and every single one of them just reaped a whole load of personal shit and crap and suffering in their lives as a result. With everyone, it was different. So it felt like a bespoke, personalized package. You'll suffer financially. You'll suffer with your family. You'll suffer with your mental health, but everyone's suffering in some way. And so that's a consistent point. And if we're going to be grown up about it and if we're going to be sensible about it, I think that's the conclusion we have to come to, that this realm is presided over by an entity or a force which is not good as in the way that we like to think of it. And this place was not created for our benefit. We're not here to learn lessons or grow and evolve. Reincarnation doesn't teach us things over successive lifetimes. If it did, we wouldn't have a memory wipe every time we come in so that we find ourselves stumbling blindly around in the dark. That's the madness of this reality to me. There are no clear answers. You have many people that claim to have all the answers. This guru over here, or this spiritual teacher, or this priest, they'll say, my way of looking at the world is the correct one. Everyone else is wrong. So which one are you supposed to listen to when you've got hundreds of thousands of voices yapping away and it just becomes this cacophony and they all claim to have the answers? Who do you listen to? How do you know this guy's right and all the others are wrong? It's more likely that they're all wrong because you can't know
Right.
why we're here, because your memory has been wiped, because you don't have a guidebook, you don't have a manual. You just left to make the best of it.
So it actually, I mean, there seems to be evidence of this place is made for trauma, right? If you look at the way the wiring of the brain works, like doing all this understanding of satanic ritual abuse and trauma-based mind control, it is revealed to me that trauma is the only thing that really rewires the brain, really
Right.
hijacks the will, turns someone into a robot, and that, and then if I maybe this, the whole loosh farm idea of like maybe we are being preyed upon by something that needs us to feel like pain and anguish, and even though we're good, we're still attacked by these non-corporeal things that see us as food. I mean, even Jesus had to give his flesh and his blood and, and have all that torture, uh, maybe when those animals get eaten horrifically by larger predators, maybe they're just getting all their suffering out in one big bite before because they have to have some amount of suffering before they die in this realm. Like, and it's just like punching their card, all of their punches all at once, like with the when the teeth go in and the blood flows.
And these are not
I don't
popular
know.
ideas. So I get why people don't want to look at this stuff.
Right.
I don't know how this book is going to go down when I get it out. I might lose 90% of my readership, but they're important subjects that need to be
Right.
spoken about. And
Right.
I get why people don't want to go there because it's not cozy, it's not comforting. But do we want to get down to the real truth of what this realm is all about, or don't we?
Right.
I certainly
Right.
do. Well, I've got the opportunity to try and discover it in this lifetime,
Right.
as far as I'm able.
Right.
So, and again, people like to attack the messenger. This is going to be the main core subject of the foreword from the author when I'll be introducing the book in this way. If people hear information they don't like. They shouldn't attack the individual that's brought that information to them if they're merely reporting on a state of affairs that we all find ourselves within. So I didn't make the world the way it is. You didn't make it the way it is. We would never have chosen to have had an existence like this. There's so many ways in which it could have been better. And so again, it shows that whatever force designed it the way it is, it wanted it the way it is. And you were talking there about the idea of louche energy and entities that might live outside of sight in some other realm, some other spiritual dimension that feed off of pain and suffering. And there's a brilliant metaphor for this allegory in the TV show Twin Peaks and the movie Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. So I've been analyzing Twin Peaks a lot in recent times because I'm very late to the party. It's quite embarrassing. I'm like 36 years late to the party. So I remember Twin Peaks coming out on TV in 1990 and everyone was talking about it. And they're like, oh, this new show is out and it's incredible. And, the next episode's on tonight. And I was someone at the time who, if everybody else was talking about something, I would probably avoid it because I didn't like going with the crowd. So I was like, what's all the hype about this show? It can't be any good, man. If everyone's talking about it, I'll just avoid it, put it out of my mind for a few decades. And then recently I got put onto it and I got pulled into the first season. And I'm like, wow, the stuff there is here.
It's got everything.
So much. Dude. Have you watched it?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes.
Right.
It's amazing. I mean, it opens with a young girl who was trafficked by politicians. Like, I mean, all the levels and layers.
Right. So many layers.
There's this little island where it's like in between Canada and America, and they got their own little laws going. And the one-eyed Jack's like, oh my god, dude, it goes
so much to decode. And there's a lot.
The owls are not what they seem.
in the prequel movie Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, 1992, which came after seasons 1 and 2, but the narrative is set before the events of season 1. That movie is very dark. It's very dark in tone. It's very different to the quirky nature of the TV show. And it's a tough watch. But you've got these surreal dream sequences coming out of the consciousness of David Lynch in this place called the Red Room or the Black Lodge. And you've got this little guy, this sort of midget guy, Michael Anderson, in a red suit. And he's this spirit or this entity from another realm. He's known as the man from another place. And he speaks backwards. So the dialogue is reversed. And this is interesting to me as someone that's researched reverse speech therapy and reverse speech messaging, backmasking within music. It's a real thing. It's a science. So they've got him speaking backwards with subtitles to show you what he's saying. It's very eerie. It's this very unsettling effect. But he's revealed to be this entity or whatever that feeds off of the negative energy of humans through their suffering. And there's this food source which is referred to as garmonbosia. And he says in his backwards dialect, I want all my garmonbosia. And he sends this demon, basically Bob, who's this entity that possesses Laura Palmer, into her world as his envoy to reap and harvest all this garmonbosia. And it's described in the subtitles as pain and sorrow. And you see him shoveling it into his mouth in the form of creamed corn. So that is a nod to the idea of a louche farm, louche energy, and it ties into the Gnostic creation myth of the demiurge and archons and such. And the idea that negative energy and fear-based suffering and trauma actually serves as sustenance to these evil entities that live in some other kind of realm. And I don't think that's too far from the truth. That would explain why there's so much suffering. It would explain why the natural world, the food chain, was set up the way it is to ensure that there's a never-ending supply of horror and trauma and fear and death. And again, these are horrible things. I hear myself talking about it, and it's not pretty, it's not nice, and that's why most people don't want to look at it. And they describe me as negative for looking at it. But again, it's not me. I didn't create it. Don't get mad at me. If you want to get mad at the force that made things this way. So,
or
That's
those
where I'm
that,
at, man. I wish I was somewhere else, but that's where I'm at.
or you could get mad at those that still have free will and are in human flesh, but they align their will with that evil force,
Right.
and, and they are the actors who are doing the order following in this world and actually doing the suffering.
Well, I
The
think
people.
that explains why the so-called elite ruling class get down the way they do
Right.
and conduct some of the behaviors that they do because they've realized the way this realm is structured. It's energetically synchronized to reward evil behavior and
Right.
to punish good behavior. So they've realized that their easiest run through life is to align themselves with that dynamic and put all this suffering into the world and cause others to suffer so that they themselves can have an easy ride through. That does actually explain a lot.
That,
It explains how they're able to live that way when the rest of us can't because we've got these things called consciences which bother us. They're that firewall that's in place to ensure that we don't undertake certain behaviors. But they don't have that because they're psychopaths, most of them.
right.
Psychopaths, sociopaths, devoid of empathy, devoid of the capacity for compassion, which enables them to carry on in those ways. And they, generally speaking, seem to have an easy ride of it. People will say,
Right.
oh, there'll be spiritual consequences for them when their lives are up. Will there? We don't know. Maybe there will, maybe there won't. But while they're in life, while they're in this world, they seem to do pretty well out of it.
Yeah. And actually, Hans Utter and I have been doing a series of ongoing looking at this one topic again and again called the Klepoth, which is the tree of death side of the tree of life. It is the same tree, but it's like a mirrored opposite of this Kabbalah tree. And the it basically maps a whole system of like putting the entire world into a black magic ritual that is pushing all of our consciousness down away from the source of creation into separation and division and chaos at where they and that way they by pushing all of humanity down it lifts them up in their magical process and
Right.
puts them at this turns them into George Soros or whoever the hell else. It makes sense. And then you see like on the timelines, all of these like in 1933 on Wrigley Field in Chicago, there was this Jewish Kabbalistic Baal sacrifice of child on Wrigley Field, and there are all these dancers, and they're all is this televised, or I don't know if it's televised, it's 33, but anyway they had the footage, uh and it's these types of things put our brain into a certain state, and they put our they push society in certain ways too. And if you see on the tree, it's like famine is one of the Sephiroth. Well, it's not a Sephiroth, it's like a broken husk or whatever. And then there's plague and the different things that they're doing to us and the different timings of when they burned the cathedral in Paris and when they did these other things. They were kind of trying to map it out, and it's what you just described there about um, how they're what they're doing to all of us. It's actually in a scientific form with this Klepoth. It's I can't really describe it. I'm sorry. We've done so many shows, I still can't really like
Well, you
summarize
mentioned
it. It's
there that
just
it's like a tree of death, which stands in
yes,
opposition to the tree of life. So there's
yes,
duality, opposites,
yes,
polarity, and they
yes.
are clearly a very real dynamic within this realm.
Right,
But you get told often that everything's in balance, in perpetual balance. Um, I don't think it is. You have opposing values, but if everything was in balance, wouldn't there be a bit more joy and happiness and abundance in this world than there currently is? We have all the
right.
horror and the terror, no shortage of that. Where's the playoff of that? Where's the pendulum
Well,
swinging to the other side? You know?
I'll bet you what the pendulum swinging to the other side is like the innocence of children, like good families, like the stuff that we used to have before we got infiltrated by the radio and the TV and the Satanism. And like we've had three good generations of like total black magicians in control. But for a while there, I mean, you know, there's families and love and stuff that, human uh good characteristics might have been that opposing factor. And maybe those have been eroded away by these at least three generations of full on trauma based mind control, mass ritual. You know, maybe if we could break away, maybe we could, it could be rebalanced someday, maybe.
Sure, things used to be better in human society than they currently are. And I often think about what this creation could be, what this realm could be without this so-called elite ruling class of parasites and, sick Satanists. If they just weren't here, if they weren't seeking to dominate us and enslave us, and they would just leave us the fuck alone to thrive and evolve in our own way, things would be a whole lot better for human society. I mean, the natural world would be continuing. You'd still have the horrors of all of that. So that's never going to go away, seemingly, for as long as this realm is in place. But yeah, human society could be a whole lot better for sure if we were just allowed to pursue all that.
And you look at most of nature is like a symbiotic relationship with each other, and only the predators really are the gross ones, that really have no morals. Like, and predators are only like 1%. And it's kind of the same way as the amount of psychopaths of the human species. So it's really not, I mean, if you turn and you look at all the way all of the plants work with each other, and then all of the animals work with the plants, and there is, there's light here. There's trying to keep the glass half full, man. But I'll tell you what, like the predators are only just a little bit. And the psychopaths too are only just a little bit. And maybe once we realize our power and our own ability to say no, because we are under hypnosis, right, as a society. And if I'm sure that we might be able to, maintain control of ourselves and then our families, and it might organize itself. I know you're an anarchist and you understand the natural organization of humans. You can look at language, and that's total anarchy but we all understand each other when we speak. So there is hope, I think.
Well, my central message of inspiration towards others hasn't actually changed through this black pill period. So, 10, 15 years ago, you'd have found me saying you should seek to minimize the amount of harm that you do. You might not be able to eliminate it altogether, but you should certainly seek to do as little harm as you can. Help others when you can. Try and make this world a better place. Try and see the bigger picture. Try and look beyond yourself and your own immediate selfish needs, because that's ideological Satanism, right? Just consider what others need and how you can be of service to them. I haven't changed in that stance, even though I've already observed in this conversation that you can often reap unfortunate consequences from that. I'm still saying you should do it, because if you have all your capacity intact for empathy and compassion towards others, it's the only way you know. It's the only way you can act. You can't just become a psychopath. You can't just switch all that stuff off and say, from now on, I'm just going to be an elite psychopath. If you have empathy and compassion, you're always going to have it there. And it's always going to eat away at you through the form of your conscience if you're conducting behaviors that you know you shouldn't be. Because most of us instinctively know the difference between right and wrong. So the message is, keep doing what you know to be right. Who knows? Maybe we will be able to organize ourselves in some positive, beneficial way if all of us live according to those values. The opposite is we all just become completely selfish, completely narcissistic, completely psychopathic, and then this world gets even worse. It's bad enough already, isn't it? We don't like it the way it is. Don't make it
Right.
worse.
Good,
At least
good
try
point.
and make it better.
Right.
So,
And
how's
that
that for
right
a
there,
parting positive message?
yes, I mean, right there, I mentioned earlier about how the brain is wired for trauma and like that's how, but we're also wired for love and care for others and compassion. And, the Buddha knew that. And, you know, the, uh, the Jesus story has that as an integral part of it because humans know this inside already and they recognize it with Jesus and they're like, okay, I'll go with that. And yes, okay, I'm like Jesus. I want to be like Jesus too. And it's the flypaper that they, what I mean? It attracts people because they know that this is the truth is that we do care and love. Like, I mean, a mom with its baby, like you're a dad, like, I mean, uh, so like that is a natural human trait. So maybe even though this place is being used as a loosh farm, maybe we like the nature of us, I think, has a divine kind of light, and I don't think it can be squashed. Like you said, your conscience. You can like I did some shows with John Euler, and we talked about how psychopathy is engendered in people, and it takes a long time to wear away your conscience. And he compared it to pornography and how people go down in these weird paths of like more violent, more worse, and it's the same thing with the psychopaths to go further and worse, and we won't do that. It's not it's you wouldn't do that. I mean, you are vegan, you choose not to harm. You work hard to not harm, and you think consciously before you act. That is the healing of the world, I think. And um you know despite it is balanced because in you are a light, even though we might get depressed as we learn the truth of others and how they are. um but still we do balance that, and we just you speaking and keeping your work going and your books, this is it really does combat the because some people might just go along with whatever the new pop star says and might be like, oh, maybe Damien Eccles is a good guy, and because you know Henry Rollins likes him and whatever, they if they read your book, they won't be fooled. And that's what it takes. It takes our ignorance for them to catch us and to really sink their teeth into us. And the more that you push the truth into our ears, the more you work and you keep working despite your outlook.
Right. And it
That
just
is
becomes a
really the
case of
key.
finding joy wherever you can as well. And that will
That's
differ from
right.
person to person, but any little pocket of enjoyment that you can get that just keeps you going so that you can continue to do the work that you need to. We need a little recharge, a little reset, a little re up every now and again. And however you find that, as long as it's causing no harm, if it's causing no harm to others, then go for it. I like to relax
That's
with a
right.
beer in the evening, no
That's
harm
right.
done. Just helps me to chill out. And it will differ, everyone will have their own little coping mechanisms. If it's causing no harm, it's fair game, you know,
Right.
fill your boots
That's
and keep
right.
going.
That's right. Well, God bless you. Thank you so much for bringing all of this to us today. And
Whereas
it's great to speak to an old friend.
good to
And
reconnect.
yes, totally.
And
And
definitely jump
so
on jump on one of my last Good Vibrations episodes and share your latest Kubrick findings. We must do that.
you will be amazed at what I've discovered. I don't know if I've told you about the time code stuff and
Yeah, you've touched on that. That
all.
dude is an obsession for you, isn't he?
Yeah, I can't get away, but the more I look, the more I find and learn. But it's not just Eyes Wide Shut syncing with itself. All the movies synchronize with each other, and I can tell you how it's really amazing. But the moment when Alex DeLarge is giving and he's watching the ultraviolence and he's talking about how seeing the blood on the screen, it's really when you see it on the video screen is when it's really real. And he's like, they're doing that. That's the moment in Eyes Wide Shut when the ritual, when he walks into the real space and we see the naked women and we see the same red, and he's describing about seeing the red. So
Well, we'll
if
get
you look
into
at the
all of that, but
timelines,
to my thinking, there's no
oh man,
way that can be human planning. Genius as Stanley was, there's no way he could have sat there and worked all this out and constructed the films that way. I think other forces are causing it to play out in that way.
maybe, yeah, maybe he was a magician, but I've got some stuff. I'll talk about it on your show, but
Yeah,
I've
let's
got
get into that.
some
I look forward to that
what I think
conversation.
is proof that he was able to do it. But yeah, fantastic.
Sure.
So let's after we end this, don't run away. Let's see if we can make a deal, a date for that someday.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Sure.
Wonderful. So anyway, tell us. Everybody can find you at Mark Devlin. Mark
Well, it's
Devlin DJ,
djmarkdevlin.com.
djmarkdevlin.com, right?
So djmarkdevlin.com is the main hub website. I've got a YouTube channel which got taken down during COVID and it popped back up again last year for some reason. So all my videos are intact on there. You can find me on YouTube.
Wow.
I'm on Rumble and Odyssey. I'm on the One Great Work Network, like yourself. I've got all my books. I've got 8 books. They're all on Amazon. There's audio versions of all of them except the latest one. And you can find those on Audible. And on my website, you'll find details of where I'm speaking. I do loads of conferences and stuff, mainly UK and Europe. I occasionally get over to America or Mexico and places like that. But yeah, it's all at djmarkdevlin.com. That's the one-stop shop, man.
Well, I am so glad that you came and shared your time with us today, and I'm glad that even though Good Vibrations is ending its chapters, I look forward to your future works, and I know you're not going to stop. And
Oh, it's not going to stop.
that's right,
It
and
stops when I
everything.
stop.
That's right. Right. Thank God. Yeah. So let's hope you stay healthy and good because I look forward to your future works. And everybody that's listening should do as well. And hopefully they all click and discover what they can. Musical truth books are voluminous. There's a lot to chew on with those, especially, and the fiction books are delightful. So everybody should click and discover more of Mark Devlin's work. Thank you, Mark, for joining us today.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate that. All the best. Cheers.
Awesome. All the best to you. Cheers. Take care, my friend. And thank you, listeners, for listening. We will see you next time on Wake the Dead.